This is how to hire your first teacher to grow your tutoring business. And the first important thing is to define your values. So, what are values? So, they essentially are a set of behaviors. So, for example, this teacher has a value of being patient. And the behaviors of being patient is usually they tend to listen more than they speak when they talk to a student or helping a student. And number two is that they encourage the student who might not be motivated. So why are values important? Because number one, when you are hiring, it gives transparency to what values, which are a set of behaviors that you expect. So personally, I have ex-employees who actually gave comments or good feedback that since we actually show the values and what we expect and we judge them or feedback them according to it, they actually have a good and clear way on how they can improve. So it gives transparency, not so scared of like, oh, have I done something wrong? So this is true when I was managing my team because number one, some of my ex-employees feedback that they know what they did or they can improve on, and we tell them as well. So this gives a lot of transparency for them to like improve. Then the second thing is it gives us a structured way of hiring and firing. So you don't have to hire according to gut feelings and whatnot. At least you have a structured rubric, which I'm going to share at the end of this video on how on a rubric that you can actually follow when you want to do hiring and maybe in the future firing as well. So personally, I have hired and managed over 10 plus employees, and right now it is still the main thing that I look for when people ask me about hiring or when I'm going to hire in the future. So you might be saying, okay lah, I don't really care about values. I just hire based on if they can actually teach. So maybe you have gone through this where you ask someone to teach, and then after that, you saw that this tutor, Bala, scolded a student. And that's something that you personally have a value that you shouldn't scold a student. And maybe what happens is that the student complains to the parent and the parent complains to you. The parent might say, hey, why are you scolding my student? Why are you scolding my child? My child is supposed to learn and have a good experience with you. And then the worst case can come, which is student leaves and tell friends to not join your tuition because they had a bad experience. Number two is that since the parents have a bad experience from his or her child, then they will tell other parents about the experience that they and other parents might not join your tuition. And lastly, they might, worst comes to worst, have a bad review on the internet and social media. But now, what if, like when you listen to me, you want to improve, you actually hire based on values, and then you actually have someone teaching according to what you give clearly on what you expect. And they say, oh, lucky I listen to Aris and I'm very strict in hiring. So this is why values are important. And the best case when you hire on based on values is that students tell friends to join tuition, parents tell other parents to join tuition, and you might actually have good reviews on the internet and social media. So how do you then choose values? You're convinced, right? But how do you choose? So for me, I've created values for my previous company before. We had five, and I think we realized that it's just easier if we manage with three because it's harder if you have a lot of values. So for those of you who are first timers in terms of hiring based on values, let's start with three, right? Number one is easier to remember, and number two is easier to manage with your values. So this is what I recommend because I've gone through education myself. So I call it PEG, patience, empower, and growth mindset. So I'll explain why these values I recommend and also what are the behaviors of these values. So number one is patience. Would you hire a tutor who has very little patience and maybe scolding this student saying, this is the first time I repeated the same thing? Or you're going to hire a tutor who has patience and say, okay, maybe we should do more practice, or maybe I should improve on my teaching. So the B, usually I think you choose B, right? So the behaviors of patients is from my experience and how I define it is that number one, they tend to listen more than talking. So for me, I've taught for like 7 years, right? And when I'm helping a student on one-on-one, I tend to listen more because I ask them, okay, can you share with me what do you think of this? Like, for example, in science, osmosis. And I listen. And this gives me a better understanding on the students' concept of osmosis. And then this allows me to actually see what I can do better to make the student understand. Number two is in the patients, be encouraging if student is not motivated, because your patience is going to be tested when the student is not motivated. And that's where you got to be a bit more patient to understand why maybe these students suddenly don't feel motivated. You probably ask, hey, usually you're like the happy, but today you're a little bit sad. Can you share a little bit why? And then sometimes maybe it's because they might be facing some internal problems. So this is what I believe a patient teacher is, and a recommended value for a teacher. All right. The second value is empower others. So I've learned this when I was going through like mentoring kind of sessions and also training. And empowering is a very good value, especially for someone like yourself who's trying to teach and maybe also mentor students. So in this example, would you be where you just tell the answer to the student, the answer is two lah, right? And then or B, where you empower them and actually ask them, okay, from this question, what do you think the answer is? Is it two or three? And then they have to think, and then they say three, and then you say, oh, congrats, right? So this is good, is because students will feel better about themselves in terms of answering for themselves, because most of the time when you teach, you want them to have a more critical or independent thinking. So by empowering them, it increases the independent thinkers, and then they actually be confident and they can do more harder questions or harder challenges along the way. So how do you act as someone who empower others? Number one is you tend to ask questions rather than giving answers. That's something that I personally have gone through and actually improved on. So when it is a very obvious answer, you have to ask, what do you think the answer is? And sometimes they can't answer, and that's where you give choices. Okay, do you think 1 plus 1 is equal to 2? Or is it equal to 3? And now they have a choice, 2 or 3. I think it's 2. And you can ask, oh, why do you think it's 2? And now they say, oh, because if I put 1 and 2 fingers, it becomes 2. So this empowers them to actually answer their own question, and then they make them feel good. And you can also give the second one, which is positive reinforcement. It's like, two, all right, very good. You actually got the question right. And now they feel happier because you empower them to answer their own and also positively reinforce on how to answer the question. So that's why I recommend this second value. And the last value, when you want to hire a tutor, teacher, instructor, it is growth mindset. So especially when you're a small business, you tend to make a lot of mistakes, which is perfectly normal. And that's something that you should also be okay with, making mistakes and expecting mistakes from other people. So if someone were to make a mistake, would you be happy if the tutor get the feedback and improve, which is A, or B, just stick with the same, which I hear some tutors actually face when they hire. So most of the time it's A, because a lot of times the current students are very different from students 10 years ago because of a lot of things that's happening around the world. So with this growth mindset, this allows you to be more open to feedback and constructive criticism. So there are times where you might slip up, and that's normal because we are humans. So with this, when you hear feedback and constructive criticism, which I have gone through myself, it is very painful to hear the honest truth, which is most of the time your insecurity. And the thing is that once you accept it and actually improve on it, you grow as a person. It is going to be hard because this is a very personal thing. But if you can find people like that, you will grow together and you will grow the business. So these are the values that I highly recommend. So what if you want to find your own value? That's perfectly normal as well. So what I recommend is to actually go to ChatGPT or any AI chat and ask to suggest values for a teacher. So you do a little bit of brainstorming. They will list down a bunch of values that you can actually look and actually see, and ask for the behavior as well, because values are very vague. You don't know what values are, right? What is patience? So you need to actually break down what the values or the behaviors that you expect from these values. Okay, so I want to hire someone who is patient. So you ask your friends, colleagues, and students, current or even past students, do I show patience where I don't scold you if you got the same mistakes? You can ask ChatGPT on what behaviors are, right? And then if most of them say yes, great. Then that's a value that actually aligns with you, and this is what you should expect to other people you're hiring. Otherwise, I recommend find another one, because life lesson is it easier to work hard for a hardworking person, or is it easier to be patient for a patient person? So, if you want to be patient, and most of your friends say you're not really a patient person, I recommend, which is going to be an ouch moment, work on yourself. Because if you hire a patient person, but you're not a patient person, this patient person will actually do very well. But the thing is that they don't want to work with you because your values are not aligned. So either you work on yourself or find another value. This is the rubric that you need to do when you were to hire, when you were to interview this person or give this person a trial lesson. So maybe you put the person patience 3, because the reason is they have past experience in dealing with naughty kids, or you see in the trial lesson that this person is actually pretty patient. So why you put in this kind of rubric is because you reduces the amount of variability, or I call it guessing, right? So this gives you a number and the reason why you gave the number. If you have a low score, then you also must give a reason, right? So this person don't really have a growth mindset. So growth mindset means open to feedback. So you gave a feedback about maybe a task that you have given this person to teach, but this person is not open to the feedback that you gave, and that's why you score 1. And overall, lastly, you decide on the values and when you interview someone. So you'll see a bunch of scores and the reason and the values as well. And you have to make a decision. With this, it gives you a better understanding on what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. So in this case, maybe you're not okay with someone who do not have a growth mindset. So because a growth mindset actually, plays a part with the other two values. If someone is not able to take in feedback and improve, what are the chances if for example, being empowering or patience, maybe in the future they might not be as patient. So you need someone who is always improving to actually be someone that you want to work with for a long term. And that's where you put in the decision and the reason why as well. So this gives you a better understanding. So maybe in this case, the growth mindset is actually very good, very self-aware of the weaknesses, and accepted my feedback when I tell them that, okay, your lesson, it wasn't that great, but can you do another one and improve from it? And actually they did. But maybe the empowering others, not so much, because this person don't really know how to empower others. And that is essentially a skill. So with growth mindset, in my opinion, you can generally improve every other values that you might be lacking of, because with a growth mindset, you can, number one, improve and taking feedback to be a better person, and that's someone that you genuinely want to work with. So remember, a hire can make or break your business, and especially if you're going to hire someone who is a full-timer, the values are going to be tested, because it is going to be a full-time thing, and they're going to reflect and represent your business or tutoring business. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want more of these kind of videos, subscribe down below and comment down what are the values that you're looking for a tutor. With that said, all the best and stay safe. Bye bye.